Man of Steel. 2 words when spoken still provokes passionate divisiveness, despite being almost a fucking decade old.
I'm older now than my father ever was.
Is it a masterpiece, or is it poo-poo, deep or shallow, realistic or supposed to be exaggerated? But to fully understand it, you have to put it in context with the rest of Superman's broader filmography. The last fucking Superman movie back in 2006 was a 2.5-hour film where he stalks his ex and gets beaten up. The film was so goddamn distracted by its own nostalgia that I forgot it casted a 24-year-old Superman who's supposed to have a 5-year-old son. Or, knowing Bryan Singer, maybe that's deliberate. As a result, Man of Steel, like The Incredible Hulk to Ang Lee's Hulk, is a deliberate franchise course correction.
I just think he's kinda hot.
Instead of having beautiful trumpets singing the past away, it's got crazy violins jamming away. Instead of being a movie where Superman never throws a punch, he punches everyone. Instead of throwing a kryptonite island into space, the entire Earth is being turned into Krypton. Man of Steel's main branding purpose is to be neither nostalgic and not be boring. It's supposed to be cool and hip in the most provocative sense of the word. If the theme of Justice League was I'm not broken and I'm not alone, in the sense that it was about outsiders becoming something greater as they form a community, Batman v Superman was about beautiful lies where people deceive themselves to avoid an ugly truth, from the anxiety produced by the media to the characters' own fears as they react to a new order of power, Man of Steel is about choice. At the center of the story isn't actually really Superman or Clark Kent, it's Jor-El. He's the main character in the opening 15 minutes, the ghost which Clark searches for, and it's his decisions that results in the third act.
My son is twice the man you were.
You see, the big philosophical difference between Earth and Krypton is choice. Kryptonian society is a caste system where people's purposes are chosen for them.
Your mother and I believe Krypton had lost something precious, the element of choice. Chance.
And this inward conservatism is exactly why they lost their ambition and mined their own goddamn planet until it blew up. As Jor-El said, what if a child aspired to be more than society had intended?
What if a child aspired to something greater?
He gives his naturally born son the freedom to choose, but also like an Asian parent, he's not just happy that he's alive, but also pressures him to have results, to be a successful role model.
You will give the people of Earth an ideal to strive towards.
You doctor yet? No, Dad, I'm 12.
Choice is also reflected in Lois choosing to give up her story and to side with Clark.
I'm dropping it.
Whoa, just like that?
There's also the random priest giving Clark advice to choose to take a leap of faith, and Superman telling the government to just accept him because he chooses to help, and that should be enough.
Are you effing stupid?
As a result, there's 3 things that needs to be immediately noted. Firstly, Amy Adams. Damn woman. Secondly, Superman isn't really a character, he's an idea in this film. No offense to Deborah Snyder, she seems like a very nice lady, but Man of Steel at every direction avoids making Clark relatable and instead paints him as an uncomplicated being through the eyes of everyone else.
This man is not our enemy.
There's 2 very big examples. First, when Clark finds his father, Jor-El just recounts everything we saw in the beginning of the film.
Eventually, our military leader, General Zod, attempted a coup.
If this was really Clark's story, it would have Smallvilled it, where we follow Clark's total lack of knowledge from the very start and then explore his reaction very thoroughly. Instead, the scene is more about Jor-El. We know as much as he does, and we feel the same satisfaction and pride he has when he reunites with his son.
To see you standing there having grown into an adult.
The second is the priest scene that everyone likes to make fun of. The arc of the scene isn't on Clark, but the priest, as he goes from deeply afraid to seeing Clark's resemblance to Jesus and then becoming inspiring.
The trust part comes later.
If this was about Clark's relatable point of view, the focus would have been on his reaction to the fear, and then becoming inspired by this priest overcoming his fear and giving hopeful advice. There is, of course, the flashbacks that gives insight into Clark's childhood, but unlike Batman Begins, it's not designed to immerse you deep into his trauma and motivations, where we begin with a broken man without purpose, but as he's mentored, the memories we're privy to is him quite literally reassembling his own mind and forming the foundations needed for Batman.
Why could you not avenge your parents?
In contrast, when we're introduced to Clark, he's already saving people and is fully motivated. The flashbacks are instead used to show how far he's come and how resilient he is. Jor-El is not really much of a mentor as much as he's just vindicates his choices. Also, the flashback of Jonathan's death, unlike Bruce's parents, isn't a trauma in need of meaning making in the present.
My anger outweighs my guilt.
But instead is a confident story Clark uses to convince Lois to not run with her story.
What do you think?
In fact, in almost all of Act 2, Lois Lane is pretty much the main character.
For some, he was a guardian angel. For others, a cipher, a ghost who never quite fit in.
Superman is an abstract concept who echoes, as opposed to a character who changes. That's why Zack Snyder's always going on about goddamn cinematic markers and Turkish Airlines.
Like Turkish Airlines thing. And I think, and the Henry as well, it's such an iconographic thing, you know, it's like you're gonna play Superman. It's abstract, you know, you're like, what does that mean?
Superman has always wanted to help people, not because of his upbringing, but in spite of it. He wants to know where he's from, and when he finds out, he's straightforwardly happy, as opposed to having a mental breakdown and an existential crisis.
I think I was sent here to conquer. What kind of planet am I from?
I found him.
It's you who decides what kind of a life you're gonna lead. Not me, not your mother, not your...
My parents. My people.
What if it's part of who I am? Is that the kind of person I will become?
I know where I come from now.
Clark Kent, you're here to be a force for good, not a force for evil.
How can you be so sure?
I'm so happy for you, Clark.
Because I am your father. I raised you, and I know you better than anyone.
When he meets his people and they're a bunch of assholes, he doesn't side with them. He doesn't feel sort of personally conflicted.
So you want us to bomb them with that?
He kills Zod, is sad, and moves on.
Glad to be here, Lois.
A lot of people say Superman is very underwritten in this film, and as much as I wished it was more of a character piece, more in tune with comics like Birthright or Earth 1, where they really get into Superman's existential crisis when it comes to him figuring out what to do with his powers, it's not that Man of Steel is underwritten, it's just that it's not about a character, it's about a symbol. Superman is more of a monolith that looms over everything. And this brings into the third aspect of the film's themes. That's kind of unavoidable when you talk about this film, which is the Randian objectivist ideals.
Maybe.
Ayn Rand is very controversial. She's like this super libertarian philosopher. She believed in laissez-faire capitalism, where the government should stay out of the free market and everything should just be self-regulated. Which, living in a country with free healthcare, no fucking thanks. But Zack Snyder is known for liking Ayn Rand, or at least he thinks her windows look cool or something. Also, he actively and publicly wants to constantly adapt Fountainhead.
I had a big meeting one time on Fountainhead. People were like, you know, do you want to make that into a movie? And I was like, wow, I'm a big fan of the book, but I was like, I honestly don't know how to do it.
However, he's also clarified that his connection isn't political, it's more creative, whatever that means. Good for him, I guess.
She does have that kind of comic book heroic, there is a naivete to her philosophy that I always feel like maybe my first brush with the idea of this Renaissance Superman came from her. And I kind of went backwards.
Kind of went backwards is the key word in that Zack Snyder interview from 3 years before Man of Steel was released. The idea of the objectivist, heroic individual untethered by regulations left such a strong impression on him that you can clearly trace it in the way he updates his idealistic presentation of Superman. Objectivism is basically Ryan's idea that you shouldn't ever do something for other people, you should only do it for yourself, because selfishness is a rational virtue in life. Oddly enough, Joey Tribbiani summarizes it pretty well.
Well, yeah, it was a really nice thing and all, but it made you feel really good, right?
Yeah, so?
Well, it made you feel good, so that makes it selfish.
This philosophical undercurrent is why there's some really weird, baffling scenes in Man of Steel, because taking an inherently altruistic character, Jonathan Kent's entire character is the most explicit, and it's not surprising that it's where the movie loses most people.
What was I supposed to do? Just let him die?
Maybe.
He basically teaches Clark to be apathetic and prioritize his own individual self-interest above all. Like, hey, your individual secrets matter more than the lives of those kids. Then in his own death, he forces Clark to let him die so his son would learn to continue to defy his own natural altruistic instincts. The death isn't a lesson of humility where Clark learns where even with all of his strength he can't save everyone because there are things that he just simply can't stop, like a heart attack.
All those powers, and I couldn't even save him.
But It's a lesson in, even if he can save people, he shouldn't if it involves risking his own life, or in this case, just his secrets.
I let my father die because I trusted him, because he was convinced that I had to wait.
Furthermore, Krypton society is literally built on not letting anyone have any individual happiness or the freedom to pursue it. And Zod's big angry rant at the very end is literally about his collectivist identity.
I exist only to protect Krypton.
Choice as a theme is where the Randian themes kind of crystallize underneath.
And even if it takes you the rest of your life, you owe it to yourself to find out what that reason is.
The key word in that speech is owe it to yourself, which is supposed to be the main motivational frame for which Clark's story hangs on. A line which echoes Ayn Rand's famous quote, "My philosophy, in essence, is the concept of man as a heroic being, with his own happiness as the moral purpose of his life, with productive achievement as his noblest activity, and reason as his only absolute. What makes Clark Kent happy is doing something he believes he owes himself, not owe to his family or society, just purely as an individual." But at the end of the film, he still chooses to become a superhero who lives for the service of others.
Look, I'm here to help.
Not just with his cape, but as a reporter. But what's more weird is that Zack Snyder's following vision then directly contradicts, and not just that, but like tears apart the themes and messages of this film. In Batman v Superman, you still have Martha Kent talking about, hey, you don't owe people anything, but Clark just ignores her, and despite how unbelievably unhappy helping people is making him, he still does it, because he's very explicitly motivated by altruism.
Did you file the football yet? Why aren't we covering this? Poor people don't buy papers?
Whereas the real antagonist of the story, especially in the Ultimate Edition, is technically Batman, who spends more time killing people than helping people, and it's out of guilt that he stops being selfish and lives in the name of Superman's honor after he died. So into Justice League, it's literally about a community of people coming together, benefiting from each other. Arthur has to stop being selfish and thinks about other people.
Our people suffer.
Your people.
I thought you didn't care.
I never said that.
Cyborg accepts that he's not alone. Flash is motivated by the fact that he's making his father proud by being a member of the best.
Your kid was one of them, Dad.
Batman is just happy to be putting all of his faith into everyone but himself.
Alfred, for once, I'm operating strictly on faith, not on reason.
That's why I brought you together.
Dan is there to help shepherd everyone. Clark lives for Lois now. There's even a moment when Superman was resurrected, he returns to the Kryptonian ship as the voices of his fathers echo from Man of Steel. But it culminates in the new lines where Jor-El says,
Love them, Kal, the way we loved you.
In Zack Snyder's vision, we go from a story about doing the right thing as long as you put yourself first. Then it's about forcing that individualism into a place where it can no longer be sustained and has to take account of other people and not act unilaterally.
To have an individual engaging in these state-level interventions should give us all pause.
So that in the end, everyone can learn to live for each other. It's wacky stuff. The legacy of Man of Steel is wild and weird on a thematic level. I think it's alright. Although I'm not as harsh on it as I am with like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films when it comes to comic book accuracy with the character, because Superman is comparatively way more extremely artistically fluid. Peter Parker's story is very fixed. It's about a jerk kid trying to redeem himself in a life of pain and confusion, enduring the worst to become the best. Lee, Ditko, Romita, and Kane's original run is and always should serve as a manifesto of the character, who he is as a personality. But Superman is shaped by what he represents right from the get-go, and that can pivot based on what's relevant to the decade. During the Great Depression, he fought for social justice against landlords and the establishment. Then after becoming a World War II propaganda tool, he was for the establishment, a symbol of domestic conservatism. Then he fought corporate America when he was rebooted. Then the President of the United States of America when he was a corrupt billionaire. Superman is always fighting the immensely untouchable in the name of the common man. If Spider-Man is a Rorschach test, then Superman is a magical mirror which reflects and compares the world now to the dream of the past, reminding and inspiring what forward looks like. In Zack's Sword of trilogy, Superman's journey is where someone embarks on their journey because they owed it to themselves. Then he accepted the complexities of a world filled with other people, and finally he acts because he owed everyone else.
They wanted me back for a reason. I need to find out why.
Thousands of other super beings on the other planets he's destroyed, right? And we have to assume he's won.
I don't care how many demons he's fought and how many hells. He's never fought us. Not us united.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to be diplomatic, alright? Leave me alone. Yo, so that was my Man of Steel video. This was being in production for a very long time because I was gonna make it right after my Justice League video back in the day, but then I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. To this day though, my Batman v Superman video is still my favorite video I've ever made, so check that out. If I had to give my opinion piece on Man of Steel, for me personally, I loved it when I first watched it as a teenager, but then I kind of hated the movie because as an impressionable teenager I fell into the hate bandwagon, but then that actually led me to becoming so desensitized to all the criticisms against the film, like Jonathan Kent being a dickhead, that all of the issues stopped bothering me. It's that point where your brain just starts reciting talking points from other people and you're not really engaging your own motor skills. Finally in my 20s now, Man of Steel's alright, mainly because if I want like classic live action traditional Superman, I have an entire awesome TV show I can go back to. So nowadays I kind of just treat Man of Steel, and this can sound very strange and very random, kind of like Punisher Warzone, where it's a genre experiment. Like, what if Punisher was a trashy grindhouse film? Man of Steel was like, what if Superman was in an Roland Emmerich alien invasion picture? Except not crap.
Well defended and well said, sir. We got another question right now. Who's this one for, Radio Room? This one's for Henry, who's standing by going, am I still on TV with these guys? Henry, we got a question for you. Alone in the Fortress of Solitude. Oh, it's a Twitter question. It's not a video question. Here we go. So listen up. In the film, Henry,